Doing rear brakes on a 2012 Audi A3. This should apply for about 2009 through 2013. Already taken the wheel off, however you take the wheel off. The jack is here only because I didn't want to move it. The car is up on 4 jack stands. To get the rear caliper off, you need a 13 millimeter and a 15 millimeter. 15 millimeter is to hold the hold down bolt. The 13 millimeter is actually the small bolt that goes through the outside of the caliper into this hold down. And then if all goes well, we should not have to remove the caliper bracket. But if you have to, that is a special wrench. And at the end of this, I'll make sure to give you the model number. Okay, now you just reach back for the caliper and pry it off a little bit. So, however you choose to do this, you can use a couple of screwdrivers. You can try just your hands. My hands didn't work as well. Because on the back of this is expanded out all of the way. And so that's part of the problem. So this is the special tool I was talking about to be able to wind the caliper. You need to have 2 pins that fit in these 2 slots. They do sell one that fits on the end of a ratchet. I just find it harder to use. I have this for several different models of vehicles that I work on, so this particular tool set works very well. It's an Atlas tool. And you see it fits in those 2 notches. And then you just tighten it down to hold it in those notches. And then twist it in. It goes clockwise. Both the right side and the left side are done in exactly the same manner. Should turn fairly easily, but it does take some force. I mean, you're not going to turn it with just a couple of fingers. And I'm just watching the rubber boot go in. You can see it's wound all the way back now. This is really, really tight. Has been every time I've changed the rear rotor. So what I do is get a 2-pound mini sledge, tap on the outside, and the underside, and it takes a few whacks. But you see, it'll pop loose, and then you just bring it out. The rear, we'll take a picture in a minute. I went ahead and cleaned it up and put high temp black paint and some silver paint on the mating surfaces for the rim. For the front, you're going to need a couple of different screwdrivers. That's to get this off and to pry the caps off in the back, and I'll show you that a little closer. So you take a cap off here, and you take a cap off here, and then you need an 8 millimeter Allen wrench. It doesn't have to be on a socket. You can get an L-shaped one, and it'll still work. This is just easier for me. And then you need a 21 millimeter socket to get the caliper bracket off. You do have to remove it here in the front. I've already removed the hold down screw from in here. These are a pain if they have to be drilled out. Make sure when you put them back that you put some anti-seize on them. And now we'll just slowly remove parts of this. So you can just pry one of the wings out and its corresponding leg, and the other one will move very easy for you. Now take this, pry those little caps off that I showed you back there. So that's what the cap looks like. One at the top and one at the bottom right here. And once you get them started, you can pull them out with your fingers. And you shouldn't need the screwdrivers anymore unless you make a mistake putting them back together. Now take the 8mm Allen and just loosen these up. They do fit down a long plastic rubber type gasket, but you can see even the socket fits nicely. So you shouldn't have to worry about another Allen wrench not fitting the caliper off. And again, they're rather tight. They do need to be changed. I'm going to show you one other thing. I just use an orange strap from Harbor Freight, and I run it through my spring several times, and that's going to hold my caliper. You don't want it dangling free, pulling on your brake hose. You can get any piece of wire, you can get a wire tie, you can get anything you want. I just have this in the garage for brake jobs. So then I pop the brake pad out, and then I just feed this through the top of the caliper. And then it goes in. Like that, and holds it, and the brake line's not on tension. Break the 21mm nuts. My impact gun is just too big to fit in here. You could use an impact gun to break them loose too. I just use a breaker bar. Once they're loose, switch to a good heavy ratchet. Just loosen up. So just come in here and scuff this with some sanding paper. Gonna put the rear rotor on. Yes, I've cleaned it with brake cleaner and everything. Make sure you get the hole close to where it's gonna be, because it doesn't like sliding much. So put it in those two grooves, play with it just a little bit, and set it. Rotor's turned. Put some anti-seize on it. Like I said, it doesn't always want to turn easily. Now just very, very lightly. And you see the anti-seize, since I put enough on it as planned, came all the way out to the end to coat the V. And that's what you want, is to coat the counter sink also. Doing the rear pads, so take them back behind. This identical is behind, and we're just going to bring them on and click them on, set them right on the shoulders here, just like that. Now these are the slide pins, and they already have anti-seize on them that we've done. And bring your caliper up that you've already run that in on, and keep it back. It goes in kind of at an angle. It's a pain because of its hard brake lines, and then you just push those slide pins in just a little bit to get that to slide back. Now what I find it easier to do is to run one in, because you've got to overcome the spring on the top of the brake pad. So that now on the bottom one, I'm able to overcome those springs and push it down and in and then put that in finger tight. You will have to use the 2 wrenches again. The hold down will turn on you. Remember, it's a 13 and a 15 millimeter. I don't like using open end. I prefer closed end. My brake line was in such a way today that the open end just worked a little nicer. If you noticed before I started, I had sanded this down, repainted it high temp black, and had redone the mounting plate, painted it high temp silver. Then I just put a light coat of clear over them. I don't like seeing this all rusted through my rims. Wheel mounting studs that I absolutely love, and especially on a new rotor that went on here, it can still move a little bit for you. So this locks it in place as I put the tire back on. I need that socket wrench. 17 millimeter. We're just going to put this on now. Going to kind of close up, and then we're going to work on the front one. So I just lightly run this in. I torque all of my lug nuts on all of my vehicles. This takes 95 to 105, so I split the difference at 100 foot-pounds when I get ready to torque. Using the anti-seize again. Run it in nice and slow. You see the anti-seize come out into the countersink again. I just back it out. Run it in very lightly. All it's there is to hold that. Keep it from rattling some. Put the bracket back on now. So. Remember, these are the 21 millimeter nuts. I'm going to switch to my breaker bar again. Ready to put the caliper in. Remember, we have already taken the cap off of the brake cylinder. Don't forget to do that, because this is pushing fluid backwards through a line. So I use an old brake pad from my previous brake job here. And then I'm just pushing the piston back. And again, you shouldn't have to force it with wrenches and everything. I do wish this particular company had put a little bit longer, more comfortable handle on this. And there, it just bottomed out. So now I take it off for the new brake pads. The first one will be the outside one, or you could save it for last. I'm just going to show you and kind of get it out of my way right now, because I need to unhook the caliper so that I can get the next one to fit back in. It has these 3 prongs that have to fit down inside the caliper piston. Sometimes push them in a little, loosen them a touch, and then you can see as they start to drop in there, just keep pushing, they'll drop. There you go, they dropped. And now that just fits over. Remember, you've got your caliper bolts in the back that you'll have to push out just a little to get them to line up with their holes. There. Take your 8mm socket again, or your Allen wrench rather. And just slightly tighten it. Just remember, just like in the back, you don't have to tighten them. You don't have to crank on them. They just have to be hand tight. So there it starts to hit, and just, you know, about not even a quarter turn. They just have to be tight. They'll hold it. Take your plastic caps, push them back in. Make sure you take your hold down off. And once you get done, come over here before you do anything else and put that brake fluid cap back on. You don't want to move the car if that's off. So it's right down there and it's on. These are the tools, other than the screwdrivers and things I showed you. A small breaker bar, the wheel stud mounting kit, wheel hanger kit. It's an M14 by 1.5 for this particular car and a lot of European cars. This is your brake caliper tool. Here's an 8mm Allen wrench that you will need, a 21mm, and then we already showed you the 13 and 15mm metrics you'll need on the rear set. 17mm to take the wheel studs off, small 2-pound hammer to get the rear caliper. If you have to take the rear caliper off, you will need this tool. It is a Blue Point tool, and it is part number BLP XZNM 3814. And if I remember right, that's for a 14-star nut. Oh, starting yet or not?
Yes.
Okay, one last thing is before you drive away, jump in it first. Put your foot on the pedal and pump the brake pedal a few times. See, it'll go to the floor. Just keep pumping. See, you want to get some pedal back. Keep pumping before you move it. Good. Do that 3 or 4 times, then you can start the car and put it in gear, and you're ready to drive.